It's because I've been taking the stairs all day. I've developed an aversion to elevators. I saw Suzanne Malveaux and the CNN camera next to an elevator in the Russell Building this morning, and I got nervous. This morning, Chris Coons even suggested there's surely got to be room for a television show that goes along the lines of Jerry Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. Some decaffeinated version like Senators in Elevators with Advocates. So wait for that one. There's an old joke that says when you're serving in the House of Representatives, you run toward the press at every opportunity. When you're in the Senate, you run away from the press as fast as you can. My experience has been that's not a joke, that's an axiom. Let me get serious for a couple of minutes here. I'd like to say a few words tonight about the search for truth, which is what all of you here tonight are all about. It's what defines your profession. Near the beginning of the document that made us free, our Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident." So from our very beginnings, our freedom has been predicated on truth. The founders were visionary in this regard, understanding well that good faith and shared facts between the governed and the government would be the very basis of this ongoing idea of America. Without truth and a principled fidelity to truth and shared facts, our democracy will not last. Over the past few years, we've seen the truth, objective, empirical, evidence-based truth, more battered and abused than at any time in our history. The term alternative facts has been enshrined into the American lexicon. We've seen an unrelenting daily assault on the constitutionally protected free press, an assault that is as unprecedented as it is unwarranted. I would say that the truth has well been accosted, but my kids would call that a dad joke. It seems that some of you agree with my kids. It is said that if you serve long enough in Washington, you'll see just about everything. My 18 years in this town hasn't been all that long, especially compared to politicians like Orrin Hatch, whose retirement party I left early to be here tonight. But I can tell you that I thought I would have to serve a lot longer than Orrin Hatch and still would never hear the President of the United States refer to our free press as the enemy of the people, a phrase that has such an ignoble pedigree. And of course, as those in this room know well, the President has it completely backwards. Despotism is the enemy of the people. The free press is the despot's enemy, which makes the free press the guardian of democracy. The careless use of the term fake news is not just injurious to the body politic, it puts journalists in real danger. Those of us who travel overseas, especially to war zones and other troubled areas around the globe, frequently encounter members of the U.S.-based media who risk their lives, some lose their lives, reporting on the truth. To dismiss their work as fake news is an affront to their commitment and their sacrifice. But it's more than that. It also lends language to dictators, language used to stifle legitimate dissent and to crack down on journalists in their own countries. The values of free expression and reverence for the free press have been our global hallmark. It is our ability to freely air the truth that keeps our government honest, and it keeps the people free. Between the mighty and the modest, truth is the great leveler. That's why respect for freedom of the press has always been and must always be one of this country's most important exports. And in our country, from the trivial to the truly dangerous, it is the range and regularity of the untruths we now see that should be cause for profound alarm. As George Orwell warned, the further a society drifts from the truth, the more it will hate those who speak it. In America, we do not pay obeisance to the powerful. In fact, we question the powerful most ardently. To do so is our birthright and a requirement of our citizenship. And so, we know well that no matter how powerful, no person, not even the president, will ever have dominion over objective reality. Of course, the major difference between politicians and the free press is that the press usually corrects itself when it makes a mistake. We politicians usually don't. Any of those who have spent time in public life have endured news coverage that we felt was jaded or unfair. But in our positions, to employ even idle threats, to use laws or regulations to stifle criticism, or to take away credentials, is corrosive to our democratic institutions. Simply put, it is the press's obligation to uncover the truth about power. It is the people's right to criticize their government, and it is our job as politicians to take it. The question of why the truth is now under such assault may well be for historians to determine. But for those who cherish American constitutional democracy, what matters is the effect on America and her people, and her standing in an increasingly unstable world that is made more unstable by this parsing of truth. What matters is the daily disassembling of our democratic institutions. If we compromise the truth for the sake of our politics, we are lost. That is why the work that you do in this room has never been more important than it is today. Now, if I can address those beyond this room for a moment, to my colleagues whom you will be covering in the next Congress. I'm sure they're watching on C-SPAN. As historian John Meacham in his book, The Soul of America, reassures, he says that history shows that we are frequently vulnerable to fear, bitterness, and strife. The good news, he says, is that we have come through such darkness before. Perhaps, but not with both Twitter and nuclear weapons. And certainly not with such an anomalous presidency as this one. But I take John Meacham's point, and I'm heartened by it. We will get through this. But at the moment, we are in it, and we must face it squarely, because far too much is at stake for us to turn away. A culminating event such as the election of our current president scrambles normal binary notions of politics, and we are all disoriented at the de-alignment. We find that many of the day's biggest issues simply don't break down neatly to familiar ideas of left versus right, but rather more along these lines. Do you believe in democracy or not? Are you faithful to your country or to your party? Are you loyal to the law and the Constitution or a man? Do you reflexively ascribe the worst motives to your opponents, but somehow deny, excuse, or endorse every repulsive thing that your compatriot says, does, or tweets? Those questions have sent some of us wandering into the political wilderness. Fortunately, I'm no stranger to the wilderness. Now, in fact, during one congressional recess, I spent a week alone, voluntarily marooned on a tiny island called Jabinwad, a remote spit of sand and coconut trees in the Central Pacific, about 7,000 miles from Washington. I'm not joking here. Determined to test my survival skills, I brought no food or water, relying only on what I could catch or collect. That, it turned out, was the easier part. More difficult was dealing with the stultifying loneliness that set in on the first night and never left me. By day 3, for companionship, I began to mark the hermit crabs that wandered through my camp endlessly. I marked them with a number just to see if they would reoccur. By the end of the week, I had 126 numbered friends. I still miss number 72. I was not so fond of number 12, who pinched my big toe. Now, I wouldn't recommend such drastic measures for my colleagues to measure their independence, but I hope that should they be asked to go along with policies that they cannot abide or condone behavior that simply should not be condoned, that they would eschew the comfort and security of the tribe and set out into the wilderness rather than compromise their conscience. I would urge them to challenge partisan assumptions regularly, recognize the good in their political opponents, apologize every now and then, admit to mistakes, forgive and ask forgiveness, listen more, speak up more. Partisan politics sometimes keeps us quiet when we should speak out. A prominent strain of my political party has traditionally claimed an instinctive mistrust of concentrated power. And when the White House has, from time to time, been occupied by the other party, these stalwarts of small government and constitutional principle have been eagle-eyed and in a full throat rushing to your cameras to defend against grave threats to the institutions of American liberty posed by the Democrats. Where are these guardians of liberty? One could fairly ask, when the objective reality itself is commandeered by a president of their own party. Crickets, as the kids sometimes say. I would tell my colleagues, if you find yourself in a herd, crane your neck, look back there, check out your brand, see if it really suits you. From personal experience, I can say that it's never too late to leave the herd. When you peel off from the herd, your equilibrium returns. Food tastes better. You sleep well. Your mind is your own again. You cease being captive to some bad impulses and even worse ideas. It can strain relationships, to be sure. And you can find yourself eating alone in the Senate dining room every now and then. But that's okay. To revise and extend a remark the president himself might recognize, I like people whose minds weren't captured. How I miss John McCain. Now, if you will indulge me for just a minute while I talk about my beloved state of Arizona. Nearly a century ago, or a century and a half ago, Brigham Young sent my great-great-grandfather, William Jordan Flake, from Utah to settle in northern Arizona. He started a community, and after the arrival of a man named Erastus Snow, the town was named Snowflake for the two of them. It was in this small community that I was raised, on a ranch with 10 brothers and sisters, and 69 first cousins on my father's side alone. If you're wondering how a flake can get elected, well, now you know. I just wish I had more cousins in New Hampshire. Back in those early days, Snowflake was very much still part of the Wild West. A few years after its founding, William Jordan's son, James Madison Flake, my great-grandfather, was deputized along with his brother Charles to arrest an outlaw. They did so, but not before the outlaw killed Charles and wounded my great-grandfather, James Madison. James Madison Flake pitched in to help raise his brother's 4 children, and within 3 years, he lost his own wife to illness, leaving him to raise his 9 kids alone. He wrote in his journal, "Once again, I must kiss the sod and face a cloudy future." That phrase sticks with me whenever I have my elevator moments, or whenever Manu Raju jumps from behind the Russell trolley to pepper me with gotcha questions. You know it's true, Manu. I guess I have it still pretty good. In the ensuing years, James Madison Flake went on to honor his wife's memory by traveling and crisscrossing the state of Arizona and as far away as Colorado to promote women's suffrage. I have to think that this week, more than a century later, James Madison Flake would be as proud as his great-grandson that Arizona has elected its first female senator. Let me close by thanking all of you for the important work that you do. For the past 18 years, I've run toward you, and I've run away from you. And I've enjoyed, well, almost every minute of it. The work you do here is more important than ever, and you do it well. Please keep doing it. And lastly, and most sincerely, go get him a Costa. Do not back down. Thank you for having me here tonight.